we are live now. Hello everybody and welcome to Camera Basics. I'm your host as always, Saxon, and we're going to start getting into it. Sorry I'm a little late today. Room was a little booked up, so I just got in. But we are now ready to go. Let me switch over. So today is Camera Basics. So it's the first class of the month, so we'll start off at the beginning. And we'll just jump right into it since I was late. Again, sorry about that everybody. So let's go. Camera Basics. Main core part of this course is that we're really trying to make sure that we learn the very basics and introduction into the world of cameras. A lot of people have arrived at a certain point for this class to exist, and that point being at some point in time you either took a picture with your phone or thought photography was really interesting, and maybe you're just now curious on how to get either into photography as a whole, what to understand, or maybe you're now buying your first camera or you've bought one for the holiday season and now you want to learn how to use it. And that's really where we're at today. Today's the very basics of button layouts, understanding the difference between cameras, talking about things like composition, and then just going over some other basic rules like with the memory card and with some other information. So to start it all off, I always put this slide first, where to go for help when all else fails. The first thing I tell any customer of mine or anybody who's coming into the store here at APT is the first thing you should be doing is trying to read the owner's manual. Now the owner's manual can be hundreds of pages long, it can have some information that you don't need on there. There might be a lot to it that isn't necessary for what you're trying to do. But when it comes to general basic information on the camera, where something is, how to navigate the menu, what to do if troubleshooting occurs, the owner's manual is really a great resource. Speaking of resource, Imaging Resource is a great website. They also have a podcast. Fantastic. It's a blog style website. If you're experiencing problems with a camera, if you want to know if something will work for your camera, if you're trying to kind of maybe do something funky or out of the box, there are so many people on this community who really talk, and they have great information to share about cameras, taking photos or videos, or really whatever you're looking for within that kind of photography and videography world. They have a podcast too, which can get pretty nerdy, so again, listen at your own risk for that one. They get into a lot of like the details and the number specs on these cameras and all this other stuff, which again might not pertain to you. If you're shooting one of the big three, Canon, Nikon, Sony, all three of them have a fantastic website with not only info on their products, but info on just shooting in general. Nikon has one of my favorite websites out of all the camera websites, and I think it's really a good one to look at. And then YouTube. That's my personal favorite. That's what we're streaming this class on for all of you watching at home. Really, the idea behind YouTube when it comes to cameras is that people just love talking about cameras, and I always recommend if you're brand new and you bought a new camera that you've never seen before or used and you're really confused on how to work it, type in 10 things you didn't know about XYZ camera, and you're going to get about 100 different videos from all different people going through details and things that you've probably never even heard of or thought of. So definitely worth going for that as well too. Now the first thing we like to talk about in this class is where your pictures are going, because not only is it important to learn how to use the camera, but it's important to understand the process at which you should be taking the photos off of your camera and moving them to the computer. And the first thing to talk about is where they actually go, and that's going to be an SD card. Now depending on the camera that you bought, there are lots of different SD cards out there. Primarily speaking though, for your traditional mirrorless or DSLR camera, you're going to be using an SD card. SD card will look like a little rectangle that looks like a corner of it is missing. It's going to have copper contact strips on the opposite side. So when you slide it in and out of the camera, that's going to connect to the back. There's a spring mechanism that then locks that into place, and you're going to be taking that in and out as you then shoot photos. Now, first thing off the bat is that all SD cards have a gigabyte size on there. Typical gigabyte sizes go in multiples of 8. So 8 gigabytes being one of the smaller ones, which you really don't see anymore. And then it goes 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, and then up the ladder. So there are lots of different SD cards out there. There's a lot of ones that you can get. Typically when I get a brand new customer in, I usually tell them to stick with a 64 gigabyte. Depending on the camera that you have, that can take anywhere between, let's say, 8,000 photos to 20,000 photos, depending on the quality you have the camera set for and everything else. For the basic beginners class, stick to whatever works for you best in your wheelhouse. So again, if you're going to the store and you see an SD card is $140 versus one that's $70, obviously make your choice there. Typically why you would see an SD card more expensive than the other is because of its read and write speed. Some are going to be faster than others. The faster SD cards are really built for your more high-end cameras, whereas the slower ones are built more for your entry-level cameras. So again, depending on the price range that you're going for your camera, you want to make sure you're getting an SD card that matches the quality of camera you have, especially if it's going to be taking a really big file format photo. You're going to want to make sure that you have an SD card that can read and write at a faster pace for that bigger file photo. And the reason we say to make sure you have two of them is because these can go bad over time. I mentioned at the beginning that there's a copper strip on the back of it, and when you insert that SD card into your camera or into your computer, you're slowly but surely wearing that copper contact out. Now, all it takes is for whatever reason, something gets damaged on there, it malfunctions, you've used it so many times, and they can eventually break and not work anymore. And you might not have any way of knowing until you physically go to turn your camera on, or you go to take a photo and it says it's not saving your files. So having two is really important. If you go somewhere on vacation, you're on holiday, or maybe you're just in Colorado hiking in the mountains, you brought your camera with you, it's going to be real tough to find another SD card out there, and it might prevent you from using your camera. So when you travel, make sure you have two of them. Your pictures are getting saved onto an SD card. Now the pictures themselves should not live on the memory card. The idea is that it is a transport method. Your SD card is going to be kind of like the mail that you send back and forth between your friends, saving the photos and taking them from one device and moving them to the other. And now with this, I would definitely recommend following these steps to transfer your photos. First thing you always want to do is make sure you power the camera off. That makes sure that everything that the camera is doing and not doing is now coming down. So if let's say that we just took a bunch of pictures, we want to first turn that camera off and wait 5 seconds before we remove the card. This gives it a chance to cool down, gives it a chance for all the photos to make sure that they're properly saved to the camera, and this also makes sure that the camera's still not functioning or in use. If you take the SD card out while the camera's turned on, you can run the risk of damaging the card, you can run the risk of losing photos, you can also just maybe even erase everything on there, which would go into losing photos, but there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that. So preferably, turn your camera off, wait a few seconds, and then you're able to remove that card. Hi there guys, welcome in.
Sorry, we're late.
Oh, you're okay. You only missed a couple minutes. We started a little late today. So once you've turned your camera off, you've waited 5 seconds, you've removed that card, I recommend placing that into a card reader. Try to avoid using your camera to transfer photos to your device. So for the most part, people sometimes like to plug their camera into their computer to then download the photos off of there. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing to do, you're running the risk of either losing the photos during transfer or potentially damaging your computer or camera. The example there would be if you have the camera connected to the computer via a cable and that cable becomes unplugged or disconnected for any reason, then while the photos were transferring from one device to the other, they could have been in between that transfer, causing you to lose all of your photos. In the sense of damaging your computer, if you've got it plugged in and everything's there, if you have water or maybe you've got something on the table, you've got the camera strap hanging off the table, if that snags or catches and pulls the camera, not only that, but you're pulling that laptop down with it too, most likely, because it's a nice snug fit. So try to avoid using your camera to transfer the photos. It's a much more stable idea to take the SD card out from the camera and insert that into a computer. Now a lot of computers nowadays don't have card readers, and that's why investing in a good card reader is not a bad idea. Obviously you go online, Amazon, Walmart, what have you, they've got thousands of different readers out there that are really cheap. If you look here in the store, it's the So you can go way out there, but you can also go for something cheaper and simple. Like I said, I like that little trifecta. It's very simple, and it fits into my camera bag really nicely. So once we've turned the camera off, we've waited those 5 seconds, we've removed the SD card from the computer, or from the camera, and we're now inserting it into the computer, we want to do these next couple steps, which is to copy the photos to a destination folder. So on your computer, you would left click, and you're either using Windows or Mac, you're going to have Explorer or Finder. That's going to help you then create a folder or find the photos that you're moving over, or copying, I should say. But in this case, make a destination folder. Typically for me, when I'm shooting, I will label that folder, whatever the day that I was taking photos. I might label it the event that I was taking photos at. And if this is something where I'm only looking at my photos once a month, I might just label it the month that I took the photos in, so that way I can separate them by year and by month. That's just how I choose to do it. However, though, the next thing on there should be, again, a very important part. We want to copy those photos to a second place. Now, the reason we keep saying copy is because if we move them from the SD card over to the computer, we run the risk of losing them if the SD card shorts out, if we accidentally unplug, if the computer turns off. If the photos are in between being moved from one device to the other, they sit in the middle of this limbo state. They're being transferred from one device to the other. If for any reason that transfer goes wrong, we're running the risk of losing all those photos that we just took. So copy them over to the computer after you've taken the photos, and then you should be copying them to a second place. Now, I think that copying them to a second place is one of the most important parts of it, only because on your computer, the photos are going to take up a lot of space. So as you keep going and doing stuff and taking photos, you're going to run out of more and more space on there. So if we can then have an external hard drive or a cloud-based solution, we are then not running the risk of losing space, but then we're also making sure that we have everything saved. So personally, from my experience, an external hard drive is a great option. They come in all shapes, sizes, prices, and storages. So again, you can go as crazy as a 4 or 5 terabyte storage space. You can also go as simple as 45 or 100, or sorry, 50, 64, or maybe 128 gigabytes. If that's not your shtick and you don't like that, obviously Google Drive exists. That's free if you have Gmail. And then there's also Prime Photos, which is through Prime Amazon. You can save all your photos to that via cloud. And then the nice part is that if you're traveling, you're going around places, if you sign into a computer anywhere, you'll be able to access all that information. So it's a good way of making sure that you have not only one section for your photos to live on your computer, but then you have a copy or a backup of those photos. Again, if something goes wrong or goes missing, it's better to have at least something that you can pull from than have nothing at all. Now the next step on there is critical to eject the card before physically removing it. Don't ever just pull the card out of the computer without ejecting it properly. This ensures that, similar to the camera where we turn it off, we wait the 5 seconds, this ensures that the card is done being used. So again, if all the photos have been transferred off, everything's taken care of on that end, you don't want to physically remove the card before you eject it. You want to make sure you bring that over to the trash can where then it'll say eject, or you left click on it and find the eject button on there. Then from there you can go ahead and remove the card. Once you've removed the card, I recommend formatting that in the camera. Formatting will erase old info on the card, but then it makes sure that the card is formatted specifically for that camera that you're using. People ask all the time, is it necessary to format? And the answer is no, you don't have to. But by formatting your card to your physical camera in the menu system of your camera, you're allowing your SD card. There's a lot of things that could be a part of that. So format in the camera, and then that way you're deleting all the old information off the card, but you're making sure that that card is optimized for the camera that you're using. You can also delete them while you're still in the computer. I have a lot of people that they only shoot on one camera and they're not changing in between. I personally have a few different cameras that I rotate in between. So I format my card depending on the camera I'm using. If that's not the case though, and you're only using one card for one camera, you can delete everything while they're on the computer and then insert the card back into the camera or what have you. So I've got this little visual to kind of explain what we just talked about on there. Your backup plan. So everything starts at the SD card. You've taken all your pictures, you've gone on vacation, you've done your photo shoot, your newborn was just born, you got a puppy, whatever the situation is. You've taken a bunch of photos. Now you want to transfer them so you can start looking at them either to edit, to email to friends, to print, what have you. You go right into the computer via an SD card reader. Once they're on the computer, you got a couple different options. First thing is that you want to make sure that you're saving it to a hard drive, or you're saving it, I should say, to a secondary source. So the two sources I recommend would either be an external hard drive or a cloud-based solution of some sort. Depends on who you are and what you like. I personally like the hard drive option. I like to have tangible items in my hands and in my possession. I'm always worried that I'm going to forget my password for whatever reason for Google Drive, or that if I start saving it there, I'm going to forget, and then before I know it, I'm not actually looking at my photos or signing in or doing anything. Try a cloud-based solution though if you've never tried one before. I think that they're great, they're easy to use, and as long as you don't mind putting a username and password in a bunch, you should be good. Google Drive is a great option. Like I was mentioning earlier, if you got a Gmail account, you already got access to it. If you are a Microsoft Outlook user, a lot of people with work or businesses are, they offer what's called OneDrive, and that's also their cloud-based solution. And then there's also Adobe Creative Cloud. That's my personal favorite because you pay a monthly fee for it, but then you get access to things like Photoshop or Lightroom, stuff that we don't talk about till the advanced camera class, but definitely a good option if you're looking for more to edit or to play with or to do on your computer or for the camera's photos. So let's go through a tour of your camera. This is where I'm going to break down buttons and things on the camera. The one thing to be aware of on this is that the pictures that are on here of the camera body are of a DSLR. DSLRs had a few more buttons on the outside of the body because at the time they didn't have the touch screens or the inside where then you can go into the menus and set things. So your camera might look slightly different from a DSLR, but there is somewhere on your camera where this button or shortcut or menu system can be located on. So keep that in mind, and if you have any questions while we're going through it, pull your camera out, call me over, I can take a look at it. Same thing online to any viewers. If you have a question about something, just chat away and I'll answer it. So in the beginning of class, I mentioned mirrorless and DSLR. What is the difference and why should you care? Mirrorless versus DSLR. So a DSLR is your traditional style of camera. Came out in the late 90s, mid-90s. It replaced the old film style cameras, your traditional SLR, single lens reflex. From there, now we have a digital single lens reflex. And so what the idea was that when you had film, you would put the film inside the camera, you wind everything up, when you're looking through your optical viewfinder, so that little viewfinder piece at the top there, you would look through it, it would hit a pentaprism, bounce off of a mirror, and light and the surrounding area around it would become visible because of that mirror. From there, you would make sure your camera was set appropriately to get your picture. You'd press the button, the mirror would pop up, burn the film in the back end, and then it would pop back down so that way the film was protected. You had a little plunger, you'd move it to the side, now you're ready to take your next photo. DSLRs took that same idea of technology, but instead they put an image sensor in the very back of the camera, and they put a shutter behind that. So what that basically did, or in front of that I should say, what that basically did was allowed you to still look through the camera like you did before, where you look through the mirror, that bounces, now you see everything that it's recording. When you're ready to take that picture, mirror goes up, shutter opens up, burns the image sensor, comes back down, and now you can see the image on the back screen of the camera, or it's saved into your card. That was the older technology, and like I said, it was probably developed early to mid-90s, late 90s at the latest. From there, we now have mirrorless. Mirrorless has been around for probably about 13, 14 years. Sony really pioneered it, made it really special. From there now, it's basically Sony, Canon, Nikon all duking it out for the first place for as far as cameras go. Everybody has their brand preference. I as well do too. But again, they're all very similar in how the technology works. So for the DSLRs, light comes through, bounces off mirror, hits the pentaprism, and then you're able to see through the optical viewfinder. When you're ready to take the picture, the shutter will open up, the mirror will flick open, and then it will then show on the image sensor. Now, we don't need that anymore. So basically what's going on here is that the mirrorless cameras, the light comes in, or your image comes in, you have your shutter in the front, which still opens and closes and works the same, and then you have your image sensor behind it. From there, there is a feed that connects to this, where then everything that you see in there is then viewable through the electronic viewfinder. So really all they did was get rid of the mirror and the pentaprism, and made it so that way you would be still able to see everything that you're trying to see when you take the photo without having such a clunky, bulky camera. DSLRs are significantly bigger for the most part, and they're wider versus their mirrorless counterpart, where they're a little bit thinner and a little bit more squat. You can even see in the one reference there. Mirrorless is truly better than the DSLRs. It's been debated, but I would say within the last 3 years, DSLRs really have fallen to the wayside, and mirrorless cameras have become everything. They're better in low light situations. They're faster. They are going to have better image quality. They're going to have better stabilization for videos. Some people would even say that they're a little bit easier to control just because of how advanced the cameras have become. Now that automatic feature doesn't feel as, I'll say, hokey for the most part. I felt like that's kind of where it was before with some of the DSLRs. It was hit or miss. But now automatic is pretty great when it comes to these new mirrorless cameras. So again, smaller camera, faster, better acting. Truly the future of cameras are the mirrorless ones. So starting at the top of your camera, and we'll go through each of the buttons. I'm going to skip the first one and go right to the power switch. The power switch is usually located somewhere on the right-hand side grip of your camera. That switch is going to be your ability to turn the camera on and off. From there, in the center of that button is typically your shutter release. Now, shutter release does two different things. One, if you do a half press on there, it'll focus in on whatever subject you're trying to do, use autofocus. And then with a full click on the inside of there, it's going to take your physical photo. Now, on the flip side of that, you don't ever have to use this for the autofocus check. There is another button that will show you on the opposite side of the camera. You could just use the shutter release for your picture. Video start and stop is usually signified by a red dot somewhere on the top of the camera. When you're shooting with the camera, if you are using automatic or any of the other settings, if you just press that button one time, it'll automatically start taking a video for you. Usually on the bottom right corner, you're going to see a countdown for how long it's been recording for. Somewhere around that, or on the side of your camera, this button typically moves a lot, is your exposure compensation. Now, exposure and ISO are two different things. ISO we'll talk about more next week. But exposure basically refers to your image, so the whole frame that you have. You can make it darker and lighter by raising the exposure or lowering the exposure. So if you've set everything up on your camera and the image still looks dark after you take the picture, take a look at the exposure compensation and you can bring it up or down depending on what you need. Your mode dial. Now, mode dial, in my opinion, is like your gear shift in your car. It's what switches you from reverse to park to neutral to drive. But in this case, it's controlling the mind of the camera. So all it's asking is, are you using this on automatic? Are you using this with shutter priority? Are you using this with aperture priority? Are you fully manual? There's a lot of different ways that you can set your camera to function. And again, for the most part, we're going to be looking at audio. So keep that in mind. And then from there, you have the command out, the live view switch. So some cameras have this. This is mainly a DSLR thing, but it's still available on a lot of cameras. The live view switch switches your screen from the live feed that it's getting from the front of the lens or to the menu system of how you're switching and changing things like your shutter speed or your aperture priority or your ISO. Those things all appear on the menu if you decide to switch from your live view of what's coming through the camera's lens or to that little menu there. And lastly is the command dial on the top there too. Now, the command dial really only comes in handy when you're shooting with the camera and you decide that I want to switch to a shutter priority or an aperture priority. Depending on the camera that you're using and depending on the lens that you're using, that dial can function as both shutter or your aperture priority. So reasons you want to switch that is when you're learning roles that teach you how to do things. That's going to be a big part of changing and adjusting things on your camera. It's turning that dial in one direction or the other to achieve then the number or the result that you're looking for. Like I said, start with automatic. It might seem silly, you might feel like you know more than you know enough to shoot on another setting, but when you're brand new to a camera and you've never done it before, it's really nice to know that with the camera you can set it to automatic, and with the focus, the cameras do a really great job at preventing that. So the dial, mode dial, like I was talking about earlier, all brands are going to do them a little differently. So no mode dial is going to look the same, but going from one brand to the other. So Nikon, Canon, Sony, Fujifilm, Olympus, Leica, Hasselblad, all of them use different mode dials, different looks, and different, let's say, letters or pictures. They all basically do the same thing. Just learn whichever one you have, and if you don't understand it, ask questions. Typically, these are the main ones you're seeing on there. So auto or A+ is auto control over settings and functions of the camera. If you're just looking again to shoot and you want to just take pictures and compose the composition on the screen, and you don't know how to set everything and how to monitor all that, go with the auto or A+. If you are someone who understands how to do everything and you're very comfortable with that, full manual control over the camera's array of functions, that's M. A or AV, depending on the camera that you have, is aperture priority. Now, I go in more detail about aperture and shutter next class, but a quick synopsis of that: aperture is your control of foreground to background relationship. It's your way of setting the camera up so that way it takes up the crispest picture of whatever it is you're trying to get. If you have your kids with you on vacation, or you go on vacation and you go in front of a brick wall somewhere to get a cool picture, you might not need the brick wall in the background, so you can blur it out. But let's say you go to Washington, D.C. afterwards and you're standing in front of the Lincoln Monument, you might then want to make sure that the background shows on there so that way you don't have a blurred out background. S or TV, that's shutter speed priority. That's going to control the speed at which the shutters are opening and closing. Best example of that would be if, let's say, you go to a football game, you bring a camera with you, you see that the quarterback's about to run into the run in for a touchdown. You're not going to want to shoot on a slow speed because he's running for his life not to get tackled. So you're going to want to raise the speed of the shutter up in order to make sure that you get the image as crisp and as non-blurry as possible. And that the only way you can really achieve that without being on full manual is the S or the TV setting.
So for those settings, because you're touching on something that I really am interested in, both of those things with the background
Mm-hmm.
and with the movement.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have it on S, it will automatically.
No.
You have to do
You'll
that.
do it. So the nice part about it is that that's the only thing you're doing while you're shooting. So other than just composing composition, making sure things look where you want them to be,
Right.
when you're on the A or the AV, A or S or AV or TV, you're controlling just that one.
Okay.
So, for example, with aperture priority, typically the lower the number is for the aperture, the more of a background you're blurring out. The higher that number on aperture is, the more you're going to see everything.
So I won't. You can show me. I know they told me that you have a Sony, so you
Yeah.
can help me with this. So
Where's the aperture?
But I won't ask you like during the class, but maybe afterwards.
Sure.
Because like how would I do like?
I can show you a little bit on that, 'cause
Yeah,
then
like-
next week we go full into detail.
Yeah, well, I kind of, my daughter has a competition on Wednesday, so I'd really like to know, like, as far as for using the S, because
Yeah.
that's what I would do, but I don't know how to control, I don't know how to, like, change those numbers, like,
So,
if I'm only doing
Once,
that.
if you
like-
turn it on right now, so basically you switch over to one of those letters,
Right.
and then this dial over here, the command dial,
Yep.
that's going to then control your use of those numbers. So if
Okay,
you start,
so which one is the command one
On the right.
on this one?
More of the numbers.
On
right?
this case, it's this guy
This
right
one?
there. Yeah.
Okay.
So they put it down. So turn that guy on, and then when you turn that number, you're gonna see on the bottom of the screen that it changes.
Okay.
And you said the higher the number, the more blur the background?
That's for the aperture one. So if we're talking about shutter speed on this one,
Well, I have it on A right now, but
Okay.
I was also, so, for the A, for the background one,
the
higher.
lower, go ahead. The lower the number, the more of the background you'll blur out.
Okay.
The higher the number, more of everything that you're gonna see.
Okay, cool.
And you should be able to see it changing. Do you see
Yeah,
it changing?
yeah,
So now when you switch over to shutter priority,
uh-huh.
you see just right behind you there. Yep, there's another dial. So there's two dials.
Okay.
So try turning that one. Do you see the numbers changing there?
Yeah, that's the one, it says 1,600,
Yep.
2,000.
So basically what it's saying
That's the
with
shutter.
that, yep,
Okay,
what it's saying there is that it's going to close in 116th of a second.
okay.
Typically, with movement and with something that's going fast, we want to have our shutter speed at least 1 in 1,000 or higher. There's really no science to it, it's just touch and feel. For example, I was at a motocross event for a friend of mine, and they were going real fast. So I was shooting at about 1 in 2,000th of a second. On the flip side of that, though, I was at the Chicago Marathon a couple of years. My friend was running, and I probably was shooting at 1 in 1,000th of a second, or maybe a little slower than like 1 in 800th. Again, you kind of just take a picture, look at it real quick,
Right.
see if it came out, and then go for it again. With aperture priority, you don't have to do too much of that because really you're just deciding, do I care about the background? Do I not care about the background? What am I trying to get in this image? What's my main focus?
So there's two different buttons for those?
Yes.
Okay,
Some cameras have it like that, other cameras don't.
okay.
Because it's all dependent. So like for example, sometimes the aperture is on the lens of the camera. There's another dial on the lens.
Okay.
Other times they have the two pieces there so you can go back and forth.
Okay, and so then if you go to auto, if I went to complete auto, it would just auto
Exactly, it's just gonna go auto everything.
What are the other settings? Like if you turn it to A,
Well, let me do his
what are
math.
those other?
Well, so if you turn it to A, then that's just aperture.
That's the only.
Yeah, so that's the only
That's
one.
where that's all he's gotten so far, we shouldn't have.
But then that's where the other one to be stuff that you can change. So like focus area. So if it's a tight focus, a middle focus, or a wide focus, sometimes within that programming you're able to then change stuff like your focus priority. Sony, for example, has priority where you can do people, fish, cars,
Right.
trains.
Yeah,
It's all
I-
dependent on the model.
Right.
Then there's other things like light metering, which as you keep moving may or may not be important to you. And there's a few other things that you can change under Program Auto. However, everything like aperture or shutter, it's still going to go automatically. So you don't have to play with it, you don't have to set those. You're just changing the way that the camera is focusing in and taking those images. Then there's B, which sometimes doesn't show up on the mirrorless cameras anymore, but is something that you can achieve within full manual or shutter priority, and that is that it's fully customizable, but as long as you're holding the shutter release, the camera's going to stay open. So for people that are interested in taking like astrological photography, or they want to do long exposure photography to get a lot of detail in there, that's the setting that they want to use on there. It's a little more complex, and I definitely recommend if anyone is interested in that type of stuff, there's tons of YouTube videos on how to do it. If not, I can break it down for them just off to the side because it's a lot to talk about. The other thing you're going to see on your camera dial is you might see C1, C2, C3, or some variation of that. Those are customizable dials, so you can set those settings any way that you want. So if you like the camera to control the aperture, but you want to customize shutter and ISO, you can set it to do that. If you're looking for, let's say that you've got a daytime, nighttime, and midday setting on all three of those, you can do that too. More or less people are using those more so to set very specific parameters per their jobs. So again, if they're going and they know that they're going to be taking pictures at a play or at a football game, they are going to have different settings for those to compensate for the light that's available. The other thing you might see are these extra automatic modes. We call them scenes. Scenes is basically not used much anymore today. It's more of a DSLR thing. But to kind of sum it all up, if automatic was just your way of taking an all-around automatic photo, scenes was your way of choosing specifically what you were doing, keeping it automatic. So like for example, the head would have been a portrait. The mountain with a cloud would have been for landscape. The flower would be for up-close macro photography. The running person would have been for speed or someone doing activities. And then the little one with the star behind them would have been for nighttime. So everything had a specific setting back then, so that way with automatic, if you were just taking a general photo, you could go that route. But if you were taking something that required maybe a little bit more skill, the camera could then be set in a way so that it knew exactly what to take a picture of. Going back to the side of the camera. So some cameras will have a flash button on there. Again, flash, pretty self-explanatory. If you've got a flash on there, that'll pop it up. When you go to take that photo, it'll then ignite your flash. Now, lots of mirrorless cameras do not have flashes. The reason being is that mirrorless cameras are really slated for great low-light photography. Where I see people needing flashes are if they're taking pictures in extremely dark situations, or if their lighting is not necessarily the best. So for example, I have a few customers that have come in. They are either promoters or they work at clubs or event halls, and so because that they sometimes have flashing lights or strobes or purple blues and red lights which create more of a dark tone, they're going to need some form of flash or lighting to get there. That's where then they would buy an external flash, a ring light, a square light, or have to get the big setup with strobes and everything else. But that's besides the point. Function can be a lot of different things for a lot of different cameras. But typically the function button is a customizable button that you can set to do anything that you're looking for. Typically it's a shortcut button. So if I want to get to light metering the fastest, I might set F1 to FN1 to that. If I want to get to my, let's say, focus area, I might set my FN button to do that. The other thing though is that usually your FN button gets set up with something that they believe it's already going to be useful for you. It's not predetermined or it's not like you using the camera, they then predetermine that. It's just they've already set it up for you, so it's one of the shortcuts. So you'll have an FN button on the camera. After that you have your zoom ring. If you've got a lens that has the zoom capabilities, that's where the zoom ring will come into play. You turn that one way, it'll zoom. Turn it the other way, it goes more wide. Your focus ring is usually either in the front of the lens or in the back of the lens. Everyone's lens is slightly different, but traditional lenses, you'd have a focus ring on the front. And all a focus ring is going to do is if you're pointing that camera and taking a picture at something, if you prefer not to use the automatic focus on the camera, you can set the manual focus. Manual focus is great. If you're shooting video, that's usually when it's more preferred, because if you set your focus while shooting video, let's say you have someone walk in front of you, the camera is still focused in on the back or wherever that other person or whatever you're shooting is, versus with automatic focus, if you're filming a video and someone walks past your camera, the camera's automatically going to lock onto the person that just walked in front because that's the closest object to it. So keep that in mind between photo and video. For the most part, for photo, just use automatic focus. If you're getting into video, I might recommend using the focus ring. Lens retract button. You don't see this a lot anymore, but with older cameras, they had a button on there that kept the lens retracted inward so it didn't open up during travel. If you have one of these, you'll know right away. You go to turn it, it won't turn. You got to make sure you turn that or press in on that lens retract button to then lock it into its when it's your zoom phase. If you're using your lens, you're done with your lens, one of the best practices is to physically remove the lens from the body before you put the lens back into its bag. Technically, the bayonet system that's made on these cameras is very sturdy, but it is technically pretty fragile at the same time too. So it's not uncommon that if you're traveling with the lens attached to the camera, if there's pressure that's put on between those, it can cause it to snap. If that happens, it is not easy to get fixed. Not cheap either. So yeah, definitely remove the lens if you're not using it, if you're traveling with it. If the cameras are on your neck and you've got good grip on it, don't worry too much about it. It's not the end of it. It's not going to do anything bad. But if you're throwing this in a backpack and taking it with you before you go to the airport, remove that lens. Use the lens release button. When the lens release button is on, it turns counterclockwise to remove, and clockwise to click onto place. You basically match up dots on your camera body and on the lens, and then from there you turn until you hear a click. Once you hear that click, you're good. If you don't hear a click while you're turning, you want to keep turning or reconfigure until you hear that click. It's very important. Otherwise that lens will just fall off, and that's also bad. Drive mode. So somewhere on your camera, you're going to see a stack of squares or a little stopwatch. Now, sometimes it's on the side of the camera, other times it is next to like your dial pad on there. This is really important, especially if you're taking pictures of action or movement. When we're in drive mode, we have a couple different options. We can do a single photo, which will take one single shot on our camera. That's perfect if you're doing headshots, if the dogs are in front of you or something and you just want to get a quick picture. But there's another one where it'll say that we can shoot a burst. And there's sometimes low quality burst, high quality burst, it'll say it on there for you. But what that's doing is that's that famous noise you hear on the camera when someone holds down the trigger and it just that's fantastic for things that are moving. Especially if you're setting a higher shutter speed, so in your case, if you're setting it to that 1000 on there, a single photo is great, but the chances of you getting it perfect are still pretty slim. So doing the burst photos, it'll take more space up on your memory card, but the idea is that one of those photos somewhere in that burst should be perfect, should have no blur to it, should be a still nice photo. So switching to that is a great option. You can use the drive mode button to get to that. The other thing you can do on the drive mode is to set a timer.
How do you do that on this one, because it's a dial and not a
So
button?
if you turn the camera on,
It's on.
you press the button, press it again. Just one press. Sorry, you gotta press that. Then
The,
Oh,
Yeah.
this one?
image, no,
the squares. So press this
square.
guy.
Oh, it's on the dial, I think, right?
There we go. Instead of press the button, I know your camera was like a little goofy there. Here. Press the back button on this guy. Turn this off. Alright. So press it on the dial, and then there you go. Now you're able to switch. And you can just go
Oh,
through
okay,
the menu.
okay, I've seen that.
So the ones that you're thinking of, that would be that one right there. That's gonna be the continuous
Okay,
shooting,
Yeah,
or then single shooting. Those are the
Okay.
only two that I recommend.
okay.
The timer on there is nice, but preferably there's an app you can download on your phones. I forgot which one it is. I personally don't use it so much myself because I don't really need a timer on there.
It's the IEM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so many.
It's really nice
Yeah,
because
and,
you
yeah, I
can
set it up, I did it by accident, and it was like taking pictures, and I was like, oh,
That's-
that's cool, like, yeah.
Canon's got one too. Definitely worth it. What you got?
I can't seem to find the drive mode button.
Yeah, you can see where it's at. Here, turn this guy around. So yours is on the bottom dial right there. So if I turn this guy on, it should be on already. Right? So you don't have a lens retract button, but you have something similar where when the lens is turned to that dial, it locks itself, and you gotta turn it to 18 to get it to engage, and then that's when the screen and everything turns on.
Oh, that's
Regardless though, you press that button on the bottom there, now you've got your drive mode. So same thing, you've got your single, you've got your burst, and then you've got your timer.
Yeah,
I see. So the bottom of it as well.
Yeah. Sometimes they move things around on there, but they try to keep the symbols and the shapes the same. So as I was telling people online, the same thing. These two, my two students in class today, they have new mirrorless cameras. Those mirrorless cameras mimic a lot of the same settings and functions on these guys. However, comparing it to this picture, it's slightly different on the location. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your camera. What you're doing is looking for those shapes. So where the stacked squares and that timer are, you want to look for that shape somewhere on your camera in order to then find those settings. I believe that's it for this guy. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so the next slide, same idea. On the top left corner of this camera, we have the menu button. The menu button takes us to all of our internal settings and switches on the camera. If there is something that you don't see on the buttons of your camera or on the screen when you're shooting, it is most likely located in the menu system then. That is where I definitely would recommend read the owner's manual, look through things a little bit, familiarize yourself. with how that menu layout is. It'll make it quicker to find stuff in the future. One of my favorite things, especially on some of the cameras that I shoot with, between Fuji and Sony, is that when I'm in the menu system, I can then set my creative look. So if I want to do a black and white, if I want to change some of the white balance, if I want to do a crop on there, I can do all of that within the menu system, which is really nice. Now, for those of us who wear glasses, we understand that a lot of the times with the glasses, we have to go in and readjust them and get things changed up via our prescription. The diopter adjustment is very similar to that. If you've ever used a pair of binoculars when you're shooting or when you're looking through, there's a little dial on there that helps the focus of the binoculars. That same dial is what you use to change the focus on your viewfinder. So if you're someone who's shooting with your viewfinder, there's a little dial next to your viewfinder somewhere around there that you can then change to make sure. So if, for example, my prescription with my glasses is right now not accurate to what my eye sees as. So when I'm looking through the viewfinder, if I'm switching between glasses and my non-glasses, I have to make sure I adjust my diopter every single time in order to get the correct view that I'm looking for. Again, just a little dial that you have to change sometimes. Info button. Now, Canon is a big, and Nikon were big on the info button because it kind of gave a little like cheat sheet to find stuff on your camera. It also would give you information about certain parts of the camera. Most cameras don't have that anymore, and I don't really know why, but info is still used really a lot, I should say. Info is still used a lot for when you want to look at your photos and get information on them. So I'm going to jump a couple buttons here, but if you look, there's a square button with a little triangle on the inside of your camera. That's image playback button. You press on that, you can then use the dial pad on your camera to go back and forth to find the images that you're looking for. When you find those images, you got a couple options. First thing is you can delete the image. There should be a garbage can button also on your camera somewhere. But the second thing you can do is you can press info. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell you everything about that image you just took. And I think that's a great tip or great cheat code for beginning camera people because it really tells you exactly what the camera did. So let's say that you're at your kid's baseball game, you get an amazing picture of them, they're pitching, and you used automatic, and you didn't set anything on there, you didn't do anything, you just pointed the camera, took a nice clean picture. If you're trying to learn what the camera did, you can press the info button and it'll tell you that it's shot with this shutter speed, that it's shot with this aperture, and that it used this ISO. And that's a really great way of gauging, okay, well there's a lot of sun coming here, it was not an overcast day, so it makes sense that they used ISO 100. They kept it low, they didn't need a lot of light saturation. He wasn't moving, so they kept the shutter speed at 1 250th of a second. That's pretty slow, but also pretty standard for a shot. And then it might say that the aperture used on there was a 2.8 because you were focusing in on your kid and it didn't really show any of the background off. That's a really great use of the info button, and most cameras, when you then look at your image in the image playback, have a section for info. So if you're trying to learn exactly what the camera's doing in automatic, and you're trying to gauge a little bit better of understanding, info is your best friend.
I don't think this one has
You will. You gotta press on. So sometimes they don't.
any.
Yeah. So go to a photo. Go to the image playback button. So press your square and triangle, and then from there. So yours no longer has it, but yours is right there in a little white print.
Okay,
So
so it has
1 40th of a second, f2.8. You can kind of see the backgrounds blurred out from there.
Yeah.
And then ISO is a little high, 2500. But again, it depends on how dark. Probably was compensating because of the Doxy's fur was black.
Right.
So it's only on display.
So it's
on the display, it'll show it.
Exactly. So that as you then keep clicking on that display button, so press up on the arrow tab, it's going to then show you even more information on the physical picture. So white balance on there, how that was set, standard film type. So like I said, in the menu button, you can then look at like creative stuff like black and white or sepia tone or anything else. It's volume. Let's see, you can't hit menu. No, cancel that out. Menu in the top left corner. That's another thing you get used used to. There's a little sensor on your eyepiece, and so anytime you go in front of it, it'll automatically make your screen go black. That's the same
So
thing.
how do you go back from here?
Yeah.
It displayed it.
Oh, there's a display button.
That one works too, but display is what you want to click. So display on the very top.
Oh,
There you
okay.
go. So yeah,
That's pretty good news that you can doxing.
I have a lot of dogs. Big dog family. Big dog guy in Toro. But yeah, so again, if you don't have an info button on your camera, it's sometimes the display button. Sometimes there's something in the bottom right corner that will say to display information, press XYZ of a button. So everyone's got it. Old school cameras had an actual info button. Newer cameras have that built in somewhere else. But it's a really useful tool, especially when you're beginning, trying to figure this stuff out. Now, there's an I button on this camera, which some cameras have it, some cameras don't. Some cameras will have a Q button instead, and some cameras will just have a function button where that is. All that is another shortcut menu for you to get in to change things. So for I, for example, or Q or FN, that could be your little chunk of settings that allows you to change the focus parameter area, the auto white balance, the exposure compensation, the light metering, your file size, what you're actually focusing on, some other color, RGB color changes that you can make, which again, for beginners, probably don't have to worry about that. But that I button is your quick way of changing and getting into that menu, so that way you don't have to go to this menu up here and then scroll through 15 different screens just to get to those settings. So it's either an I, a Q, or an FN button that'll be in some place around there. If it's not, it might be on the opposite side of the camera, but you'll see it. From there you have your OK button and the multi-selector. Pretty self-explanatory again there. If you're going through your images, you hit the image playback button. Those are going to allow you to circle through them. Sometimes the multi-selector is used to move an autofocus point around, and then OK is your confirmation button if you're changing settings or doing something. Usually you press OK at the end, that saves all of your settings. Then you have a magnifier and demagnifier, which I get asked a lot, why would you have something on there? Because don't you have zoom on the camera? The magnifier, demagnifier technically aren't for that. The magnifier and the demagnifier is after you've taken an image on there, you can basically zoom in on that image and check it for its crispness or its detail. It kind of shows you how much the camera can crop as well too. But it's great because if you take a bunch of photos and you're getting ready to delete some, you don't know what to do, you might go through them, press the magnifier button, and it'll zoom in a good amount so you can see the crispness on the edges or other sections of the person or whatever you took. So if you're taking sports pictures and you got somebody moving around a lot, you think you've got a great shot, you might zoom in and then find out it's blurry. So then you can make your judgment from there. This is a picture a customer emailed me a long time ago, but it's that all they could tell me was that their camera didn't work and they were really upset. I had them come in, we worked on it, and we found out it was not the camera. So the thing I tell people all the time is it's when, it's not the bat, it's the baseball player. Just because something's not working properly doesn't mean it's broken or it doesn't work. We just have to learn how to use it. And this is why I tell people before you just get overzealous and you go into these other settings and manual, aperture, shutter, try to just do automatic on there first, because it'll really give you the basis for what you're doing with the camera, so that way then you can make really nice photos. Your camera isn't a smartphone. A lot of the times people rely on the ease of a smartphone and how you can set things up and just do one click and take the photo. And the phones do majority of the work for us. There's not much to do there. You can set things and change things, but most people don't. So again, your camera isn't going to be, I'd say, as intelligent as your phone. But the beautiful part of your camera is that you're going to take a much higher quality image than what the phone can get. You're going to get a lot more megapixels out of it, or you're going to get a bigger file size out of it. You're going to be able to edit more on there. There's a lot of stuff that you're getting that you don't get on a smartphone. So keep that in mind when you're going as well too. Seems silly, but I always like to talk about this in the beginning class. The way you hold your camera. Now, anybody who does art, I'm a painter and I draw. One of the first things they warned us about was arthritis and carpal tunnel because of the way that you're holding stuff, that it's going to happen as you go. Same thing's going to happen as you keep shooting cameras, and if you get clunky and bigger gear on top of that, neck problems, back problems, hand problems, arm problems, it's all very abundant. So when we're shooting, we want to try to keep as straight of a back as possible. That's the first thing I like to talk about with it. Obviously there are going to be situations where we need to bend over, take a picture, or back ourselves up, or squat, or kneel, or do something. It's unavoidable. But if we can keep a straight back while we're shooting, we'll take pressure off the shoulders, which then in turn take pressures off the arms, which then helps us in a longevity kind of way to look at it. The other thing that we're looking at here too is the way that she's holding the camera on the very top there. One of the worst things that you can do is keep your elbows up while you're shooting and take a picture. It's number one, looks silly, but then number two, the chicken wing is going to cause you to vibrate or to move a little bit more, and with that you're going to get motion, you're going to get blurry images. So I consider this the back porch support. When you're using your elbows, you lock them into place in your rib cage or into your chest as best as you can, and then you hold the camera out to take the picture. And you can kind of see that that's what she's doing on the bottom one. From the front, it makes it a little harder to see. But basically what's happening there is that you're using your elbows and your chest to block in or support your arms and yourself, so that way you don't get as much shake while you're taking pictures. And it's important too, we can see it in this image and in the image on the bottom left side of the screen too, that when we're taking our picture, we're keeping one hand on the physical trigger or on the physical grip on the camera. Again, they designed the cameras to be ergonomic in the point where all the dials and everything are changeable right with our index and our thumb. If we need extra support, we also have the middle finger to change. But the other thing is that we're having a hand on the lens. A lot of the times we'll get a camera body and a lens, when they're together, they can off-balance each other or they balance each other out. With that being said, keeping the hand in the front versus on the body, you're giving the balance there too and not allowing the camera to tip forward while you're shooting. So it's important. If you're shooting pictures, keep your one hand on the bottom of the lens so it's changeable for either your zoom, your focus, or whatever have you. If you're not doing that, then just a balance. And then have your hand on the grip. That's its main intention. Focus, and then shoot through the picture. So a lot of the times I get people who come in and they're like, I'm trying to take a picture of this, and it's just one item, but they're like, I get a blurry image, it doesn't look right, and I ask them, where are you focusing when you shoot? And they're like, I'm focused at, just this. And I'm like, that's great, but we have to consider that there's more to that composition than just the small water bottle or the jewelry that you're taking a picture of. There's a background, there's other things going on. So we want to make sure we focus, shoot through the entirety of the photo. We're not just focused on one item in particular, we're focused on the whole frame. We'll look at some composition rules and some ideas to follow, but one of the things we talk about in the very beginning is if we're focusing on one object, then fill that frame up. Make sure it's the only thing we have in the entire frame. That's going to help make sure that we're really just focusing in on one object. If we're trying to capture a scene or something that's going on, an event, then we're focused on the entirety of the image, not just the thing that's happening in the image. So that being, let's say, we're at a volleyball game and we're trying to get pictures or videos for a friend. If we're taking pictures and videos and we're just focusing on them, then we're missing out that there's a gymnasium full of people, that there's other things going around in there, and from that then we want to make sure we're focusing in on the whole composition, or we want to then just focus in on that person and get the picture. So focus, then shoot, and shoot through the entire frame of the picture, not just small individual pieces. If you or the camera are moving, you will get blurry photos. Settle yourself. If you still have shaky hands, try to use a tripod. I know it's a hassle sometimes to carry around, but in the long run, if you want better photos, we want to make sure we're not moving, shaking, vibrating, whatever it is. So these are my basic rules for taking great photos. We'll talk a little bit more next week on some other composition, or not necessarily too many more composition, but we will break down images next week. But these are some of my tips and skills for taking better photos in general. Now, the thing I always throw on top of this is that This is my version of what to do. This is stuff that I've learned through schooling and everything else with cameras. However, like every professor I've learned from has always told me, rules are meant to be broken. So don't take this stuff to heart, but remember that if we want to get a clean photo, these are the basics that the most famous photographers have followed. So that first thing I mentioned earlier, which was fill the frame. You have a picture of someone that you're trying to get or something that you're trying to get. You want to sometimes take the best picture that you want to take the best picture that you can. In this case, we have a headshot. This might be for a resume, this might be for auditioning for a play. We have all of this, what I'll call negative space around our positive or our main subject. The negative space that's there is detracting from the main photo. You've got these moldings in the wall on the baseboard and what looks like to be the top or the ceiling and this wall meet. You've got these harsh shadows coming in from sunlight on her right side, and because of that, they're making shadows against the banisters of the wall there. So all we're going to do is focus in just on her, fill the frame, and get rid of all the extra negative space. From there, we're filling up the portrait, we're bringing things more into attention, and we're just giving our subject matter that beginning attention. Eyes in the top third. So, in the rule of thirds in photography, there is one that basically separates our image into 3 boxes. Or I should say 9 boxes, but 3 depending on the direction we go. So if we're going horizontal, it would separate into a top, a middle, and a bottom. If we were going in vertical, it would separate for a right side, the middle, and then the left. Now, in this case, if we can get eyebrows or eyes in the top third of a photo, it's going to look more interesting to humans. I don't know why that 100% is, but science shows that with humans, we like to find things that are as close to the human form as possible. And typically, eyes are always interesting, especially in photography, because they can either be daunting to some people, they can tell stories, they can have passion, they can have sadness, they can have a whole bunch of different stuff. They're also extremely colorful on the human body compared to everything else that we have. So the eyes usually are one of the first targets of any photo that we're taking. Now in this case, if we divide this into 3 sections, his eyebrow is hitting that top third, so technically we can categorize the eyes into that top third. When we look at the picture from the previous slide, we can see that her eyes are also on the top third of the photo. It's more visually pleasing to the human to see that, and so if you're looking for just a tip or trick to get maybe your photography off a little bit more, that's a great thing to practice on there. Once we get past the eyes, you've got the pink shirt that he's wearing. You'll probably be interested in that. He's got a lot of light and dark parts to his hair, between the curls there. So there's a lot going on in the photo that might be visually pleasing for us to look at. But the eyes are a big focus. And then again, when all else fails, focus in on the eyes. When you have some of these newer cameras, and especially Sony or Canon or Nikon, a lot of them have really good eye tracking technology. One of the biggest killers of photos in the, I'd say, 70s through 90s was red eye. And you take a picture of somebody, they get this awful color in their eye, and you get this red ring going around there, and it just looked like they were little mice. Nowadays, they've really changed that. The eye tracking technology that you see on cameras is pretty impressive, and because of that, it makes it really easy to focus in on a subject's eyes. Get on their level. This is one I use with kids all the time. If you've got kids or small ones at home, even pets or dogs, shooting from above or down to them creates this hierarchy scale, which makes us look like we're above them and they're below us. A lot of the times those pictures come off more candid or silly, but they're not necessarily going to be professional or something that we're, maybe really proud of or we're trying to use for whatever reason. So try to get on their level. Dip yourself down a little bit. Obviously, we talked about earlier trying to keep your back straight, but if that's not possible, dip yourself down a little bit lower. Try to get to where then, again, they are the main subject of our image and we're not shooting down at them, we're shooting at their eye level. And in this case, same idea. If we divide this into 3 sections, his eyebrows are hitting that top third section. His sister or his friend in the background, her eyes are also in the top third. makes it a little bit more visually pleasing. They've blurred the background out slightly and made him and his birthday cake the main focus, so it just overall looks like a cute photo. And if we don't think that that's enough to get the photo, then let's get lower than them too. If we shoot up at a subject matter, we're giving them the power, and we can create some really special and cool moments with that one. In this case, the kids' heads are all over the place, so the rule of the thirds in this one really only applies to the tallest girl in the green shirt in the background. However, though, it's a cute photo. It definitely looks nice on there, and if you do have smaller children or younger ones, again, great option to either be on the same level as them as when you're taking pictures, or allow them to be higher than you and you shoot down or shoot up at them. But shooting down, again, creates that hierarchy scale, makes them look smaller than they actually are, and overall won't catch too many people's eyes. Breaking down that rule of thirds again, now we're getting into the main rule of thirds. And like I said, you've got your right, your center, and your left side, your top, your middle, your bottom. If we can shoot an image and have that image fall in between these cross sections, then we're going to have something that's a little bit more visually pleasing to the person who's looking at the photos. So my examples for that, and bear with me, it's a lot of beach photos. I don't really know why. I'm going to throw a few more terms at you. Where the sky and the water meet is our horizon line. The best way to think about this is if you're in your living room, you've got your floor and then your wall. Where the floor and the wall meet would be a similar representation of that horizon line. It's where the two pieces are meeting. We have then our background and our foreground. In this case, we are on the same level as the foreground. Therefore, our background is way far in the distance, but we're basically shooting where we go up almost. We have a cross section here and a cross section here on the right side. The shadow is hitting on the other part there. The sun is positioned behind the surfer, so we're getting this dramatic photo with a lot of light leaking through. So overall, we just have a clean, fun-looking image. But by keeping it on the one side there, number one, we're breaking our first rule, which is to fill the space. In this case, the photographer wants to get the space in there because of the color of the sky or the water or the beach scene in general. There's other attributes other than just our surfer there that we're interested in capturing. Same thing for this one. We have a beach scene, it's an overcast, cloudy day, horizon line is almost perfect with that top white line of our rule of thirds. We have our little girl standing on the beach there, her shoulder and her ankle are hitting the one corner perfect, and then we have this overcast, cloudy day with the sun breaking through. Hitting those two, black and white photography, you've got a little dramaticism going on, is a storm approaching, is it just cloudy, what's going on there? But then overall, you just have a composition that is going to look more pleasing to the eye to look at. And then I have one more after this. But now we have a traditional family photo type of shoot. Maybe you're sending a Christmas card out, maybe you're just getting a portrait to hang above the mantle at home. Whatever it is, in this case, the only thing that gets me on this is that I think mom and dad should be moved over slightly. But we're hitting on the rule of thirds with both of them. Brother and sister are in the foreground, mom and dad are in the background. They are both positioned so that way they're on the rule of thirds in some way, shape, or form. But you have the parents standing back in this case and the kids standing forward. This offsets that height difference between them, makes the kids a little bit bigger, but puts them still in the perspective that their parents are going to be the taller ones.
So could you do that same picture with everything in focus, or?
Yeah.
I know that's like the effect, so you want
Yeah,
the
yeah.
kids in focus and then the other ones are.
You can, and that's where that.
We've been having discussions about that, and I'll show you some of the pictures that
Yeah.
I took, because with the eye focus
Mhm.
with this one, I have that set for taking the dog pictures and
Yeah.
stuff, so like with the dachshunds, I have like the eyes are in focus, it's an awesome picture, and the nose is blurry.
Yeah.
But there is a way with the aperture to get that.
Yeah.
Okay,
So what
I
you're basically getting is that's a lower number. So if you don't want blur, you've got to keep going until you get to a higher number. It doesn't necessarily mean, because most lenses will tap out around f/22. The aperture goes by what they call f-stop. And so basically, the lowest number that it can have should be written on your lens somewhere. That's typically a 2.8. For kit lenses, that's anywhere sometimes like a 4.5 to 5.6, 2.8. So what that basically means is that you have a continuous aperture of 2.8 no matter how far zoomed out you are. You can keep it at 2.8, but that is going to start to blur your background out and change things. If we don't want that, we go to the aperture priority. This is if we're shooting on automatic. We go back to aperture priority, and then we play with that dial in the back there. That'll change. The higher the number, the more of everything that we're going to see. The lower the number, the more it's going to just focus in on one thing and then blur the background out. Most likely with the pictures of the Doxies, you're getting close enough to them that it's able to recognize the eyes and it focuses it on the eye.
Yeah.
It's going to get the head a little bit, and then from there, the body and the nose
Yeah.
are probably
I
going to
mean, it's cool, it looks really cool.
Yeah, but you want the whole thing.
Right.
So then you want to raise that aperture up.
So, okay. And then, so in the auto,
Auto,
if
you
you
won't.
have it set to recognize the eyes on the pets or whatever, and then you have it in auto, it's gonna just do.
It should automatically move over, and so it should still do recognize pets on the aperture priority. But the same way that you set it on auto, you can do the same thing in aperture. You can set it so that way it's set for automatic eye on pet recognition.
Okay. Yeah.
Is there a way to get like the sort of the grid like as a setting, or is that
The grit.
like the
Like
three
the-
rows grid?
Oh, the grid.
Is that like a setting?
Yes, I can look that up for you. I'll open up another slide when we do this, and I'll Google it, because with Canon, I have to see. There's like a couple ways to do it, but there is a way to set the rule of thirds on all cameras. Actually, you know what? Let me see real quick. I think it's actually. So if we turn this guy on, let's go to your. There we go. Let's remove this. So if we're on here, and let's press the inflow button. No, maybe it is. Let's see. There's a way to do it.
Yeah, but that's not your intention.
Right. I'll look it up as soon as it's over and we'll figure that out. Because there is a way to do it. Alright, next slide. I threw this goofy one, I like the gym one on there. I used to love The Office, that's why I thought this would be funny. But this to me also explains it too pretty well. Eye line, he is right on that top eye thirds. His eyes fall on the lower half, but the eyebrows are there. So in my opinion, it's a cheat. You're in the top third there. From there, he's perfectly on this line there. This breaks the first rule that I talked about too with filling the space. The reason they wouldn't want to fill the space with this is if you've watched The Office, usually you can figure out exactly what room inside the office they're in when they're doing this mockumentary style stuff. You can tell he's in the conference room, the trees in the corner, the shades are there too for the window. So again, context and placing is probably the reason why they wouldn't crop in and fill the frame. A couple more things and we'll do questions on there. This class always goes a little later because it's the intro one. Sun on your back. So when you're taking a picture, the sun should be positioned on your back, but you want to make sure that you're opening yourself up so that way you get the most amount of sunlight possible. When we look at this, fish are slimy, they've got scales, they automatically have a natural shine to them. In this case though, our fisherman, call him Bob, Bob's got the sun on his back, and therefore the sun is hitting his back and it's not reflecting anywhere, it's not bouncing, it's keeping the image dark and really not as attractive. We move over and we can see that he dropped his shoulder down, he's cocked his hat up, and he's now moved the fish from in front of him to the side. So the sunlight's naturally hitting the fish. We can see how much more bright or lit up the fish is. We can then see all of the light added onto him. He's also pushed his hat up slightly, so we're getting light on his face, we're getting light on the bottom of the boat, and we're getting light on his shirt. So overall, by opening himself up and allowing the sun to come over from behind his back, you're getting more light onto the image, and cameras like light. So again, light can be a good thing and a bad thing within photography, but for the most part, it's a good thing. Use your timer in your camera app. Again, if you are unfamiliar with it, if you bought a new camera within the last, I'd say 7-8 years, most of them have an app that you can download on your device, and then you can communicate between the two. I'd give it a download, try it out. They work really well. You can control things like downloading photos to your phone. You can use it as a timer. You can even use it as a remote and then take pictures of yourself, which I've done in the past too. It's great. This goes into content creation, which again is also becoming an important part of this. We have a lot of people nowadays who are buying cameras, not just to take pictures and to have fun, but they're trying to start a business, or they're trying to further maybe their products or their designs that they're working on. And it's become more and more apparent and more popular as you especially watch YouTube and how that blows and grows up. When I first started getting ready to teach this class, my guys in our marketing and our video department told me that two things could be bad. One thing could be bad, one thing could be bad, but not two. There's three main parts to taking a picture, or a video, I should say, or doing any of this. Video quality, lighting, and sound. Those are the three main things when you're taking a video that you need to be wary of, or even a photo in general. Sound just would be out of there. Your video quality could be bad, but you gotta have good lighting, good mics. Your microphone quality can be bad, but you gotta have a good video and good lighting. Your lighting can be bad, but then you gotta have a really sharp video and really good sound. If two or more are bad, no one cares about what you made, or they'll have comments for you. So keep that in mind when you're doing stuff. Now, that doesn't mean go buy the most expensive gear and make that work. All that means is that do research and make sure you're getting what's appropriate for you. So again, for video quality, having proper lenses and proper camera bodies with the settings that you want. If you're moving or if you're just staying still, you want to look at stabilization. Will a tripod be better for me just to set on there and allow to get the picture or video? Or should I rotate to a gimbal, which then I can kind of run and gun with? For lighting, is on-camera lighting better, where we have a flash or we have a little light box on there? Do we need studio lighting, where we have big lights hanging off from everywhere, or strobes set up or anything? Or are we outside? Is natural lighting appropriate? With camera or with microphones, same idea. Do we need a shotgun mic? Do we need an on-camera mic? Do we need something that's wireless so we can walk around and do things? Keep all those things in mind and do research on those. The advanced camera class will look at some examples of all of these, but it's something to think about when we're getting into content creation.
What is a gimbal?
Gimbal is going to be basically, it's a device that your camera goes onto it and it controls the pan, the tilt, and then the roll. For video. Some people do use it for photo, but it's typically only for video. It kind of looks like you're carrying around like a, I don't even know how to describe it. It looks so strange. We've got them next to the cameras on display. Take a look at them. You get an idea what they are. Some people want to get into content creation. They don't know where to start. Get a content creation kit. A lot of these brands make a camera that either comes with the kit or it's an accessory kit that gives you the couple pieces you need to use with your camera. Typically a tripod, a microphone, and usually a remote or an SD card or a transfer cable. They're going to give you something in there that then makes your life easy to get stuff going. Recommended accessories. Now, the only thing I'm going to say for this, and I'll break down all of them, but the top 5, I think, are the most important things to have. If you are getting brand new into cameras, you should buy the top 5 things. So get a bag. Have something to store your gear into. Again, your cameras, even if you're buying the cheapest model that you can, they still cost a lot of money. So protect them, save them, keep them safe. Have an extra battery. again, like we talked about earlier with having 2 memory cards, have that extra battery, because if you forget to charge one, or you're doing a lot more shooting than you thought and that camera dies, it's going to take a while for it to charge back up, and at that point you might have missed your opportunity to take another video or shot. So have that extra battery packed and ready to go. Try to charge both batteries before you go on a shoot. Have that extra memory card. If again, one memory card doesn't work, it's better to have a backup than have none, because then you can take no pictures. A lens cleaning kit might sound silly, but having that little microfiber cloth and that spray is one of the best things you can do. Do not use your t-shirt or sweater, whatever you do. You'll scratch the lens, you'll damage stuff, and in the camera world, it's marry your lens, date your body. The body's gonna die in 10 years, but that lens is gonna be your butter. So if you can hold on to that lens and take as good as care as you can of it, eventually the camera body will become outdated, there'll be a newer model out there, but almost all camera brands make it so you can bring that lens over to a new body, even if they've changed stuff on there. For Canon, they only have 2 mounts, that's EF and RF, and for any of the old lenses that they made 20 years ago, you can put them on that body with an adapter. Sony's a great brand because they've never changed their mount.
Nikon is not.
And Nikon switched. But that's the nice part with Sony, and that's another reason why I was sold on it. I had someone tell me one time that if you're in Japan taking photos and you smash your lens, it's so nice that you can go to a store and buy any lens that they have there for Sony, and it's gonna work for your camera. So that's what I was in mind with it too. But Canon's very popular everywhere in the world, so is Nikon. So again, not hard to find these kinds of things. A strap is a great option. If you don't like the strap that came in the box, they make and sell more comfortable or maybe more appropriate straps for you or your body type, so look into those. Tripod, great for stabilization if you need it. Get that external hard drive if you don't like cloud-based solutions for saving your images. Filters are great too. That's your way of changing the perspective, or changing color or combating light. Additional lenses, which we'll talk about next week. And then go to classes and workshops. If you are even interested in taking photography or learning more photography, community colleges have or not free, but they have programs that don't require a degree or anything like that. I got groups that come in here. There's one that works at the Botanic Gardens, and it's a club of maybe like 20 or 25 people. They take pictures throughout Botanic Gardens, then they meet up, they show their pictures, they compete, and then from there, whoever is the best out of that, that's what they use for their print publication. So like it's all free for them, but that's what they love doing. So that's how they take their time. I think this is one of the last things we have on here. The bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of a low price is forgotten. Cameras are one of the few art forms that the more money you put in, the better your images basically come out. That's not to say that if you buy a $7,000 or $8,000 camera, you're going to have award-winning pictures. There's composition, there is coloring, there's a lot of unique things that go into making a photo perfect and making it something great. But if you go in and you're like, oh, I'm just going to get the cheapest stuff and that's going to make my business or my pictures pop off, that's not necessarily the truth. And if you're going in and you're getting stuff that you're not sure about, but the price is right on it, do the extra research. If it says that you should be getting something that's a little more powerful or expensive, wait until you have the time to get that, because you will then see the bitterness of that poor quality as time goes on. And that's all I got. So I got you guys out exactly at 7. Obviously, I'm here for questions, so don't worry about that. Anybody online can automatically start asking questions too. Just type in a response if you've got anything for me. But next week, it'll be the second Thursday of the month, so we're going to go into intermediate cameras. Intermediate cameras, we break down shutter speed, we break down f-stop, we break down ISO. We talk about them all separately and then how they come together. We then look at images to explain those. I tell you exactly what I'm seeing in there, and then we talk about that a little bit. And then the last part of the class, we really talk about lenses, understanding focal length, what are the trinity of lenses that you should be looking at, and what lenses do you really need. Yeah, thanks for being in class today. Questions for me now?
I was just going to show you this, one of my favorite ones I took of my dog.
Oh.
Where it focused right on his
Right
eyes,
on his
and it
eyes.
drives Jim crazy because his nose is blurry. So I'm going to practice, and then next week I'll see.
The other thing that you might like on this one, here just to show you real quick, is you're using automatic, which is this one,
Yeah.
and that's great. But that P automatic might be another good one, because then the only thing you're changing are a couple different settings on here.
Mhm.
So one of the things, if I press that FN button,
Like, you know,
should be, Alright, FN.
I have an icon before this, so that's why I'm like,
FN, we can go to that top one, which is a focus area.
right, so yeah,
And we can
right,
change it.
and yeah, there's other ways of getting there too.
Yeah, so that would be a great one to have on for the dogs especially, because that should then do a whole area, and then it should be able to focus more on just the head too.
Okay.
Keep the eye too on focus.
Yeah,
so
cause
that
I've
locks
tried
in.
different things, I've tried the wide, like the wide, or
Yeah.
the, you know, like center, or
Mhm.
what, I've been this is new, it was
Yeah.
very frustrating, cause I had, like I said, I had 2 Nikons before this, and I was planning to get a Nikon, I
Yeah.
came in and I was like, I didn't wanna spend the money, and then your buddy down there, I can't think of his name, but he was like, he gave me a really good deal on this one, cause it was like a
So
it was he's like, it was the floor model, the last one, he's like, I can give you a really good deal on this one, and so I wasn't prepared to switch, but I'm glad I switched.
And that's just not coming from the Sony, cause like it took me a while, before I even shot with any of the big three, I was shooting with Fujifilm, I love my Fujifilm camera. It's mirrorless, but it's a rangefinder, so it's got a very particular style of viewing. But what really sold me on Sony was that I thought that the editing and the ability to change things on there is just so comprehensive.
Yeah,
Right now, the two main brands are Canon and Sony.
yeah,
Canon right now is a little bit ahead of Sony. Their RF series that you got right now is considered one of the best cameras made in the last 20
yeah,
years.
like when I look for, I mean, I'm not doing any professional things,
Yeah.
I just do like my own personal stuff, but I do like a lot of shots of my kids' activities and
Yeah.
stuff, like my son is a competitive cheerleader, my daughter's a dancer, so I like to do
I got it.
good shots of them, and then my Nikon was fine, but I dropped it, so that's what happened, and I was like, okay, I need to move into a mirrorless one, and then, but now I'm like, should I have gotten the nicer one, and I'm like, I don't really think I need the for what I do with my camera,
That's a
I
really
think
good
this is.
camera. Like the Ford just came out not long ago, maybe
Yeah.
a year ago. The
Yeah.
3's still been in manufacturing for
Right,
a
well,
while
I
now.
mean, this camera is actually older than the Nikon that I had previously, so
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm getting an older camera, but it's like, it's,
It moves. It's
Yeah.
pretty good.
so
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy so far.
Good.
I'm like still learning, and I was like, okay, I'm coming to the class, cause I need.
If you want, did you get one of those cards? Did they give you the card for it? On the back of that card, there's a QR code that takes you to the YouTube playlist that I have on there. I got some questions. I will answer those questions earlier. I'll answer those questions in just a second for you, Colleen. But what was I going to say? I forgot.
Just the card in the YouTube.
Oh, if you scan that QR code, it'll take you to the playlist of all my old videos on there, and I've done the same classes already. Intermediate cameras, take a look at that, and that's where I'll break down shutter speed, aperture, and talk about those, and I'll tell you exactly what those numbers mean and how to kind of look at that. So it might be beneficial for you.
Well, I think I'm happy, I think this is perfectly what I need, I'm trying to convince myself I don't need the nicer one.
I think you have that's a really nice setup there. Focus, just keep it. I think that'd be good for you. The lenses, just keep good care of those lenses because
Yeah.
the Tamron lens is really nice.
Yeah,
So.
so I'm yeah, I just gotta play with it. I was getting a little frustrated. I was like,
Anything comes up, just contact me. I'll help you with
yeah, I
anything.
took a
like that.
picture of your email
Anytime.
there.
Yeah,
I'll be back, so,
Awesome.
thank you.
Great meeting you. Have a good one.
My name's Karen, by the way.
Nice to meet you.
What is your name?
Saxon.
Saxon, okay, thank you.
Anytime. You got any questions for me?
Yeah,
What
so
you got?
for like the dial,
Mm-hmm.
I found like there's two sorts of autos. I'm not sure which to set it to.
Well, so you can do either one. The A plus gives you no control over anything. So that's really just letting the camera do the work for you, which is usually where I tell people to start with. Once you feel more comfortable, P, the program auto, is the next one. And what you're getting access to there is... So if I'm on the program auto and now I click my Q set button,
all of these is what I'm getting control over. So that drive mode, the timer, metering mode, which is kind of the way that it checks on light and distributes it throughout the entire image. You've got your image style, so RAW or JPEG, and then you're able to switch between the various forms of that. You'll get some extra stuff on movie recording that once you're feeling more comfortable with, you can really play with. One-shot autofocus is a big part though. That's why I personally like to use the P. When I'm shooting on there, it's just an easy way of controlling things. So like in this case, it's doing face and all-around movement. But then I could just do spot autofocus or one-point autofocus or zone, so it does like multiple dots throughout the whole thing. Those are all things that you can play with and customize. So it really comes down more to your own person. Is that something that you want to do right off the bat, or would you rather just the camera do everything for you? So, your call on that one.
Yeah. So how did you activate it? You press like the middle button.
Yeah, so in this case, it'll say cue or set. So when we're on the P, if I then press on that one time, that's where it takes me to that menu. I can then use this as the dial pad to go through and choose everything that I want, skip to the next, all that stuff.
Oh, so for the menu, it gave me like 2 different options. I'm not sure which to choose.
Which one?
Let's see. I think it was far right. Yeah, it said like standard or guided.
Your call on that one. So guided will then give you just kind of what this is doing, where it's allowing you to choose kind of the like way that it's showing. The standard view is the way that it traditionally looks on the camera. So the guided view will give you like information on each one. Standard won't give you any information. It's more for like your experience. So I'd probably do the guided one on there to customize it a little bit. That way if you have questions on it, it'll give you a little blurb above it and tell you a little bit more on it. But if you think that's too much, then I go to standard, or then it'll just show you what the options are. If you need to, you can reference your manual or look them up online and kind of get information about that.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
What else you got for me?
Oh yeah, I was wondering like, is this one? I know that's like the magnify button.
Mm-hmm.
What was this like? What's that button there? Below it.
So that is going to be for your light metering. Let's see. So if we go to the menu there and we press that button, that's going to be for your focus parameter. So from there, what that's doing is if you don't want to click on the Q set button to change things, you can just use this little dial up here to then set whatever you want. Press OK when you're done. And then from there, you're done. You can also, no, that's all you got on there. So 2 clicks. Now you can change things on there by keeping it open like this because you already pressed it. It then allows you to change at any time that you want. So 1 click for starting. Okay, set. I want to change it again. Press 1 more time. Set. And then when I'm completely done, set. Now that goes away. And now we're good there.
Oh, I didn't have one more question. It was like about the grid.
Oh, yes. Okay. Let me look at just real quick. Okay, so I sent a message earlier. We'll send you an email. Please do. I didn't see the other message, Colleen. Sorry about that. I received a Sony a6100 camera. Still reading the manual. I can see the image on the main screen, but can't see it on the electronic viewfinder. So you're trying to hit the image playback on there and then look through the viewfinder in order to see the image. Or you're not seeing the image through the viewfinder at all. I'll check the email. Maybe I might need a couple pictures to show that. If not, I might say come on in if you can. If you can't make it to the store, that's totally fine, Colleen. But I can see the image on the main screen, but can't see it on the electronic viewfinder. There could be something with the electronic viewfinder that maybe the setting was turned off or something doesn't look right on there. But typically, if you hit the image playback button and then you look at the image through the viewfinder, you should be able to see exactly see the image. You can then zoom in and use the viewfinder as kind of your smaller screen to see everything on there. If you're speaking about like taking the photo, then it could be that there's something turned off on the camera, but if you just received it, I don't think that would be the case unless someone had this prior to you and changed the stuff.
shoot me that email, maybe send me a video or a picture of what's going on with it, again, if you can't make it in, and then I should be able to figure that out for you. Alright, real quick, let me pull this up. Make sure that stays open. Okay, so let's do how to set grid on R100, right? Is that the R100?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we want to do on menu, we are going to go to the menu button. We are then going to go to shooting info display. And we can then turn our grid on. So do you see how I got there?
Oh,
So I went into the first setting, which is for shooting settings. I went to screen number 7 or menu number 7. I pressed OK on the shooting info display, and then we are looking for grid on or off. I'm going to turn it on, and I can set it to be whatever I like. I'm going to set it to the 3 and 3 since that's what we were just talking about. From there, if I then push down on my trigger, I have a grid.
oh, wow.
Cool. Awesome. Anything else you got for me?
None that I can think of right now, but I'll know I'll think of eventually.
Yeah. Come on next week, bring it for intermediate, and then we'll talk a little bit more about then. But yeah, anything you got for me, write it down, email, call me, whatever's easier for you. I usually respond to emails faster. But let me know, any type of question you got on you, I'll make sure you're taken care of. And just for future, be very careful with this guy. We don't want to expose that too much to the environment, because as dust or little particles settle on there, like that little dot you got there, then we got to clean it off. And that's the most delicate and sensitive part of the camera, so we can't just do that with our fingers. There's like special equipment that you got to get to clean it. So my recommendation is to always have that cap ready, and as soon as you take the lens off, put that cap on right away. That way you're protecting it from dust or any of the other elements on there. Again, it's fine, just never touch it with your finger, and basically don't mess with it. That's the best way to put it. I've seen customers do some pretty bad stuff to their sensor on the inside, and it can be tough. So it's great meeting you.
Yeah.
Anything comes up, give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever's easier. But yeah, to get back to your question, Colleen, I would probably say there's a couple different things with it. It could just be that the way that the live view is set up on there, it might not be showing through. But it also could just be it could be something where you have to hit image play, depending on what you're trying to do here exactly. If you're hitting image playback and you see then the image that you just took on the screen, if you put that up to your eye, you then should be able to see the same image through the viewfinder. If you're in shooting mode and the camera doesn't switch to the viewfinder in order for you to then take your picture, there could be a couple different little things there, and that I would have to probably see in person, or I'd have to see the settings on there. So I'll check my email tomorrow for you, and then I'll respond back, because we're about to close up shop here in the store, but I'll make sure I get you your answer by tomorrow. Have a good one. Is there any other questions from anybody else online? Anything I can assist with before we end the video? Does not look like you got anything for me, guys. So, all right. Thank you again for joining. I appreciate you being here. My name is Saxon. I do camera classes every Thursday here for Apt Electronics. If you need anything, obviously call, email me. You can even text me, honestly, with that phone number if you need to as well. But in general, keep taking photos, keep getting out there with your cameras. If you have any problems, concerns, myself, anybody on my staff downstairs is more than helpful and knowledgeable in this subject, so they can walk you through the whole thing. And just keep taking photos, keep being out there, guys, keep shooting. So have a great night, be safe, and I will see you